I never asked her name. That was the first thing I did right, though I didn't know it at the time. She came through Camp Halloway Reach with the third wave out of Velmarch, in a column of maybe 400, all of them carrying whatever had fit in a satchel, before the Voss Directorate's armor rolled over the last of the border keeps. I was quartermaster sergeant by then, which mostly meant I signed for blankets and counted ration crates and tried to make sure nobody froze in the outer bailey come winter. She had a mending kit, a spare shirt, and a strip of cloth sewn into the lining of her coat that I noticed only because the stitching was too fine for refugee work. Small, even, done by a hand that had never once had to hurry. She registered under the name Sarah Vale. Mending shed, 3rd rotation. I didn't ask questions. Nobody at Halloway Reach asked questions, because half the camp was running from something and the other half had learned not to want to know what. I want to say I treated her like everyone else because I'm a good man. Truth is simpler than that. I treated her like everyone else because that was the job. You hand out the same wool to every family. You fix the same leaking roof over every shed. You don't skip the line for a pretty face or a straight back, and hers was straighter than most, like she was holding a posture nobody had told her to drop. I noticed. I didn't ask. 10 years, near enough. I watched her hands go rough with needlework that used to be soft. I watched her learn to laugh at Halloway jokes, the flat, tired kind refugees tell each other. I watched her sit with the camp's youngest, the ones who'd lost everyone, and teach them a counting rhyme in a dialect nobody else in the mending shed spoke, and I never once asked her where she'd learned it, because it wasn't mine to ask. The scrap of banner cloth I found the year before she arrived, half buried in salvage crates pulled off a burned transport out of Velmarch, gold thread on faded blue, a device I didn't recognize stitched into the corner. I kept it folded in my coat because throwing away cloth felt wrong when so many of the people around me had nothing. When I saw the same weave sewn into the lining of her coat, quiet and hidden the way you hide something you can't afford to lose, I didn't say a word. I just knew, from then on, that whatever else Sarah Vale was, she was also something she couldn't say out loud at Camp Halloway Reach. There were smaller things too, over those 10 years, that I only understood the shape of afterward. The way she never once flinched when the camp physician ran a standard health scan, but went pale and quiet for a week the one time the directorate sent auditors through to check the resettlement logs. The way she could read the old Velmarch trade ciphers stamped on salvage crates faster than the clerks who were paid to do it, and always looked away before anyone noticed. The way the camp's oldest women, the ones who remembered the war's first year, sometimes went quiet and correct around her without being able to say why. I filed all of it away without naming it, the same way I'd filed the banner cloth away without asking. A man learns, doing this kind of work long enough, that some kindnesses only hold their shape if you don't turn them over and look underneath. The directorate's piece came down on us on an ordinary bright morning, the kind where the wash lines were already full and the mending shed windows were open to let the light in. A Concord courier read the armistice clause off a data slate in the middle of the yard, flat and official, like he was reading a supply manifest. Velmarch's surrender was final. As part of the settlement, any unclaimed royal heir of House Ostval found among the resettled population was to be surrendered to the directorate within 30 days, to be wed to Kaelin Voss, heir apparent, in formal sealing of the peace. Nobody in that yard moved for a long moment. Then the registrars started setting up their screening tables, blood marker kits laid out in neat rows, and 400 people who had already lost a country understood they were about to be made to prove, one by one, that they weren't the last thing worth taking from it. I found her that evening behind the mending shed, sitting very straight the way she always had, hands still in her lap for the first time in 10 years. They'll test the whole camp, she said, every family. Children too, eventually, if the first pass doesn't turn up what they want. She looked at me, and her eyes were dry, and steady, and old in a way that had nothing to do with her face. I won't let them put 400 people through a needle to spare themselves the trouble of finding one. I understood then what she meant to do. Walk to the registrar's table herself. Spare the camp the screening. Hand herself over clean, so the directorate soldiers had no reason to touch anyone else's children. I told her to wait. I didn't know yet what I was waiting for. I just knew I wasn't going to stand in that yard and watch it happen without looking first. I spent that night in the camp's records shed with every settlement accord I could find, the kind of reading nobody does until they have to. It was near dawn when I found it. Order 19. Buried in the resettlement statutes from the first year of the war, written back when the directorate still wanted to look merciful for the cameras. Any refugee formally claimed as ward or kin by a camp-registered guardian, prior to identification proceedings, was exempt from external claim pending review. Ink on paper nobody had used in a decade. Still law. Nobody had repealed it because nobody had thought anyone would need it. I found her at first light, at the edge of the registrar's line, already dressed to be looked at for the first time in 10 years, not hiding, not straightening a stranger's posture, just standing as what she was. "Don't sign anything yet," I said. "Not theirs." The registrar's table was set up under the old gatehouse arch, the same stone Kesset Hold had stood on since before any of us were born, and the whole camp had gathered the way a camp gathers when it senses something is about to happen that it will talk about for years. The Conqueror officiant had her transfer papers already drawn, Kaylin Voss's seal pressed at the bottom, waiting only for hers. I walked up before the pen touched paper. "Sarah Vale is claimed," I said. "Ward, under my guardianship, registered this camp, filed prior to today's proceedings." I laid Order 19 on the table beside the transfer papers, the ink gone brown with age but the seal still legible. "That claim stands ahead of any external one. That's the law you people wrote." The officiant read it twice, looked at her, looked at me. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when an old, forgotten piece of decency turns out to still have teeth, and that silence held the whole yard for the length of it took him to find no argument against the paper in front of him. He stamped it void. The marriage clause, unenforceable against a prior claim. Just like that, 10 years of a man doing his ordinary job had outlasted an empire's convenience. She didn't cry. I want that understood. Her eyes were wet, but she held them the way she'd held her back straight in a mending shed for a decade, composed even now. What she did was reach into her coat and draw out the scrap of banner cloth, the one she'd carried hidden since the day she walked into camp, and she held it out to me, not as a queen handing down anything, but the way one person hands another something they no longer have to hide. I took the matching half from my own coat and set the two pieces together, gold thread on faded blue, whole again for the first time since Velmarch fell. "You never asked who I was," she said. "Not once. 10 years. Wasn't my business," I said. "Still isn't, unless you want it to be." She almost smiled at that, the first real one I'd seen since the courier's data slate had ruined the morning. "I think," she said, "I'd like it to be your business, eventually, on my own time, and no one else's law." I told her that suited me fine, that I'd waited 10 years without knowing what I was waiting for, and I could wait a while longer knowing. The camp didn't know what to call her after that morning. Sarah Vale, or Queen Ostval, or something in between that hadn't been decided yet. Mostly they just called her Sarah still, because that was the name she'd earned in the mending shed with her own rough hands, and a crown, if she ever wore one again, was going to have to earn its place beside it. I kept my half of the banner folded with hers from then on, whole cloth in one coat instead of two, and some mornings when the wash lines are full and the light comes in low over Kesset Hold's old stones, I think that's the only kind of claiming worth signing your name to. Not a contract written by someone else's war, but the plain, unhurried, 10-year kind, built out of nothing but showing up and asking for nothing in return.